What's going on, everybody? It's Nick Kosko with On3 Sports, and today we have a very special conversation. The NFL season has kicked off. We're already a week into it. Football, of course, underway on the college scene as well, but we can't really talk NFL without talking about the man himself, Aaron Rodgers. And to help me with that today is Ian O'Connor. His new book is out right now, Out of the Darkness, The Mystery of Aaron Rodgers. Ian, I'm really glad you joined me today, and I read the entire book. I read your previous book, Belichick, as well. I mean, it was just a fascinating dive into what you call the mystery of Aaron Rodgers. So, again, appreciate you taking the time out of your day, and I got to start out, what ultimately compelled you to dive into this puzzle? Because I know you were working on a LeBron James book. You basically put that on the shelf, and now you dove into the most talked about player in the entire NFL.
Yeah, Nick, thanks for having me. And that really is the reason he gets traded into our backyard here in New Jersey. And I played football at St. Cecilia's High School in Englewood, New Jersey, where Vince Lombardi coached. That was actually the only place he was a head coach before he was head coach of the Green Bay Packers. And so I always wanted to do a Packers book at some point in my career. Lombardi lived 8 houses away from where I grew up in Englewood, New Jersey. And so here's Aaron Rodgers, a first ballot Hall of Famer, a Packer, and now he's trying to win a second ring before he retires with a Charlie Brown-esque franchise in the biggest market in the league. And so I found that to be I thought it'd be a fascinating partnership and an interesting attempt by him at the end of his career to really historically change his legacy. Just if he could win a second ring and have that be with the New York Jets, I just think that would do so much to enhance that legacy. And so I decided to pivot from LeBron and effectively trade him for Aaron Rodgers. And I hope readers see that as a good trade.
It seems like it so far. So I wanted to do a quick comparison of your book on Bill Belichick, a fascinating inside look at his entire life, his entire career. He's now, he's not coaching right now and he's not retired. We don't know what he's going to do next. He's on TV. But when you dove into that one and, you go through probably thousands and thousands of interviews, the same thing with this book. What were some of the challenges in comparison to the Belichick book compared to this one where you're unlocking somebody who might be a little bit more mysterious than Belichick, it seems, on the surface?
Well, Belichick was mysterious, and I thought in attacking that project, it would probably end up being the most challenging one of my career. And I thought it was until I ran into Aaron Rodgers and that project. I think Aaron was actually more elusive than Belichick was. And Belichick was elusive. But at the same time, though, he was distant and mysterious. And that usually draws me to a subject. It doesn't compel me to run away from it. There was a sameness about him as a character in his decades as a coach in the NFL. And where Aaron, he was all over the place. He was a contrarian. He was a chameleon. He was a conspiracy theorist. He used to be one of the good guys in the NFL. Now he's one of the bad guys, at least in terms of perception in the media. So I wanted to explore all those different sides of him and find out why that change happened really 3-4 years ago when he was asked about his vaccination status. And he said those 4 words, "Yeah, I've been immunized." And really those 4 words changed his entire life. Before that, he was considered to be by a large segment of the media on the right side of a lot of social issues, including the Kaepernick issue. And then he became a villain. And so I wanted to get in all that. Also, the family estrangement, which I found to be rather compelling. And he hasn't talked to his family, his parents and his brothers and other relatives in 10 years. And I had not really encountered that with a star athlete before. So all those things put together, it was a puzzle, and I tried to solve it. And at the end of the day, people who get a chance to read this book will determine whether or not I succeeded. But I think that Rodgers was more challenging than Belichick. I'll say this, Nick, that I've never received, at least at the start of a process of reporting and researching a book, more non-returned messages, phone calls, texts, emails in my life than I did with this one, because he's so polarizing. There are a lot of people out there who were afraid to talk about him. I think I won a lot of those people over, but it took a lot of time, a lot of work, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And hopefully at the end of the day, you have a balanced, complete, honest, and fair portrait of a great quarterback and a complex human being.
Yeah, that's what I took away from it when I just finished it last night. So when you sit down with Aaron Rodgers, you went out to his home, and I like your little story about, bringing him coasters from his favorite show, The Office. So that was a nice little touch. He's
$15.
he's perceived as somebody who's very guarded. And I talk to people who are football fans and non-football fans, and those who just maybe see the headlines of them, and they consider Aaron Rodgers maybe very guarded, very calculated. That's how he came off in the book as well. And then, that's really how he comes off in the media too, when he's, even doing a post-game press conference. When you got to sit down with him, it was just the two of you, and, nothing was off limits, but then he would challenge you on things, as you pointed out. Was he actually that guarded? Was there a strategy that you had to put in there to get him to open up a little bit, to really show what he's about compared to how he's portrayed?
I really didn't know what to expect when I walked into his home, and it's a beautiful home. He lives right on the Pacific Ocean in Malibu. And I remember looking around and thinking to myself, he's really a self-made guy and probably doesn't get enough credit for that, because out of high school, he didn't have a single Division I scholarship, had to play at the local community college, even though he got 1310 on his SATs, and nobody ever gave him a damn thing. And he really created this first ballot Hall of Fame career, really through the singular force of his will, his talent, his work ethic. And but one thing I thought from afar, he was always one of the best interviews in the league, and I'd never covered him up close on a regular basis. So he very private, yet when he's talking in the public arena, at least as a member of the Green Bay Packers, I thought that he spoke in long form responses, didn't speak in cliches. So when I went there, I didn't know what subjects he'd be willing to engage on. And would this be mostly an off the record session, on the record? I really didn't know. I didn't know how much time he would give me. So I thought if he didn't like the line of questioning after 25 minutes, he might toss me out of there. So I went in with a priority of certain subjects that I needed to talk to him about, and hope that he would respond in kind. And he was really good. He engaged on the family estrangement. He had never really done that before to any degree on the record. And also he conceded that he made a mistake in how he handled COVID and his vaccination status, at least publicly. Not that he changed his opinion on the vaccine, but he is a guy, he's one of these guys who rarely admits a fault, a weakness, a mistake in public. And he conceded that when he said, yeah, I've been immunized, and he wasn't vaccinated, that was a mistake. That was a public relations hit that he has not recovered from to this day. And I was a little surprised that he said that. He said, basically, I gave my critics ammunition that they still have to use against me to this day, and I should have just told my truth at the time. And I did tell him that if I were sitting there vaccinated as a columnist in the press conference room that day in August of 2021, and he was asked that question about being vaccinated, and he said, I'm allergic to an ingredient in Pfizer and Moderna, and I'm concerned about Johnson & Johnson's side effects, I would have found that to be a somewhat reasonable position. And I really don't think I would have ripped you in my column that day. And he effectively said, yeah, I should have just told my truth at the time. I really do think he would have gotten criticized in some corners, Nick, but I think that he would have gotten half or less than half of the criticism that he did receive when the truth came out 3 months later about his vaccination status.
So when that happens, because it seems like over the last 3-4 years, this is where he's really exploded into more than just he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, and he's very eccentric and he's very calculated. He doesn't speak in cliches, as you just mentioned. It seems like after that Super Bowl victory, as you alluded to in your book, things started to change. But do you think that was the springboard moment where it would lead to something like this nearly a decade later, where, he went to Super Bowl, now he's considered on this upper tier with the Tom Brady's at the time, and however you want to compare him in terms of football and off the field as well? Does something like that lead to how he acted amid the pandemic and saying those 4 words, which led him to really seems like his only admitted regret throughout his NFL career?
Yeah, good question. I think his agent at the time, when he entered the league, his agent was Mike Sullivan. And Mike told me in the book that after Aaron won the Super Bowl MVP award, he felt that now that he was the best player in the sport, that Aaron decided I've been under-evaluated and misevaluated my entire career by everybody going back to high school. Now I'm doing it my way. And I think that did embolden him on the field, off the field, and might have led to that. I think that as he got on in his later years in his career after accomplishing so much, I think he dug in deeper. And once the experience of having a lot of media members who used to praise him about his stances supporting Kaepernick. And there was a time when a fan shouted out an anti-Muslim slur during the national anthem, and he rebuked the fan, and President Obama sent him a letter thanking him for doing that. So he used to get praised quite a bit for his social stances. And then all of a sudden, the same people who did that really destroyed him over the "yeah, I've been immunized" line. And I think he decided, you know what, I'm just going to dig in and stand by my beliefs, as unpopular as some of them might be with a large segment of the media and the public. And he doubled down and tripled down. And so that there's probably been some unforced errors there and self-inflicted wounds. And on top of that, you have the conspiracy theories. And then on top of that, you have the Jimmy Kimmel dust up, which was unnecessary. And I think you see, Nick, a case of a smart guy, again, 1310 on his SATs, and a lot of times maybe outsmarting himself, trying to prove he's the smartest guy in just about every room he's walked into. So I do think that the good guy who was there is still there. A lot of his acts of generosity and kindness he doesn't publicize, and his marketing agent at CAA, Ed Berry, is very frustrated by that, he told me, because he wants to have some publicity around some of these things to counter the negativity in the media, and Aaron doesn't really want any part of it. But I think that he definitely dug in recent years and almost leaned into that villainous role that he was assigned, and sometimes to his detriment. And I think that's why his public image is the way he is. One final point on that. We know how it works in sports. If you win, and you win for a franchise that hasn't won since 1969, January of 69, in the biggest market in the league, I do think that wipes away a lot of negative stuff on the field and off the field. It probably shouldn't work that way, but victory often is confused with virtue. So if he does win a Super Bowl with the Jets this year and next year, I think that would go a long way toward reversing a lot of the damage that really he's done to his own public image.
Before I dive into what he was like growing up, you brought up an interesting point, how this is his public image, the perception, and it's vastly changed over the last 3-4 years. And, that is a big theme of the book as to why that happened, or, why he decided to go that route. Craig Rigsbee, his JUCO coach, was a fascinating figure to read about. And the way he's portrayed and the way it came across to me is he was really the only guy who truly understood Rodgers as a quarterback and as a person. He vouched for him. I know the story of, just recruiting him before he ended up going to Cal. And he was he didn't want to be an intermediary in the family drama, but it seems like this is the only guy who could get through to him, maybe aside from a couple close friends. What were your biggest takeaways on how Craig Rigsbee is the only guy who truly understood him then? And do you think you could understand him now?
Yeah, it's funny. I just got a text, Nick, from Craig Rigsbee yesterday, and it was a picture of him with Aaron after the game in San Francisco on Monday night, together talking. And Rigsbee was the head coach at Butte College, where Aaron played for 1 year, the local community college. He grew up in Chico, California, spent some time in junior high in Oregon, then moved back to Chico. And so it's amazing that he had to go there. The guy was a great high school quarterback, had the great SAT score, and ends up, Rigsbee lived like 5 houses away from Aaron Rodgers and didn't even know it. And Aaron's entire high school recruiting experience was the local JUCO coach walking to his house, knocking on the front door, sitting down in his living room and convincing his mother that her son needed to go to community college. And that was Aaron Rodgers' recruiting experience out of high school. And Rigsbee is a guy to this day in his life that Aaron cannot control. He might be the only figure he can't control. And Rigsbee's not afraid of Rodgers. He's not afraid of saying things that might piss him off. And he's a great storyteller. He's almost like a Charles Barkley-esque figure. He's a great talker. He's a nonstop talker. But he saved Aaron's career. I don't know what would have happened to Rodgers as a football player as a prospect if Rigsbee's not there to recognize the talent and also to give him a platform so he would at least accidentally be seen by a Division I school, in this case, Cal. Cal was recruiting a tight end at Butte and saw Aaron Rodgers, and Jeff Tedford, the head coach at Cal at the time, said this is the best junior college quarterback I've ever seen. So, yeah, Rigsbee's still a prominent figure in his life, and he has good relationships with Aaron, his brothers, and his parents. So, and I did say this to him, you seem to be the guy who maybe could be the unifier in this 10-year estrangement. And he just feels like it's not his role. It's not his place. He doesn't, he wants to maintain relationships with everyone in that family and feels like if he tried to do that, it would end some of those relationships. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But I think it's sort of fascinating from the outside looking in to see the dynamic between Rodgers and Rigsbee. In fact, when I first met Aaron Rodgers and told him about this project, it was at the Jets introductory press conference after the trade. And I got him for a few minutes alone, told him, I'm doing this book. Here's my process. And one of the first things he said to me was, you might end up talking to this guy named Craig Rigsbee. Just remember, he doesn't let a fact get in the way of a good story. And I said, well, that's a guy I have to talk to because Aaron's afraid of him. So, yeah. But Rigsbee, he was with them in San Francisco after the game, and he's still a prominent figure in his life. And I do believe if the estrangement is to end, I have a feeling that Craig Rigsbee will play a role.
He might actually, turn around and say, you know what, I am going to help out. So when you look at how Aaron Rodgers is as a quarterback, as a person, how he grew up, I'm really glad you started the book, and I really encourage people to go out and get it to read this whole section for themselves. So without giving too much away, of course, his grandfather, Edward Rodgers, is a World War II veteran. He fought the Hitler machine, he fought the Nazis, and being a pilot and flying over. Just picturing that in my mind, I can't even imagine what that was like for him, to actually do that. When you pulled all that information about his grandfather, and when you did you draw comparisons between him and how Aaron Rodgers operated? And again, he did not go to the military. He ended up becoming first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback. Did you draw comparisons of how they grew up and how they operate despite their vastly different professions and just that whole family dynamic between the two of them?
Yeah, his parents actually thought there was something to that Aaron's poise and under pressure maybe passed down through bloodlines. You can't compare combat to anything. Football might be the closest thing to simulated combat that we see, but the parents thought there was a connection there. And so the one thing I wanted to do was try to open the book with a positive story about the family because there's been so much negativity around it. And I just thought that Edward Rodgers, his story had never been told. And in the author business, sometimes you need to get lucky, and luck is the residue of design. And my design led me into the luck of finding Dan Matthews, who was is a military records expert in Minneapolis, who a lot of World War II records were destroyed in a fire many years ago, but some weren't. And he has great access to those records. And together we were able to come up with detailed documents that used to be classified on all 44 missions that Edward Rodgers flew in his B-24 against Nazi Germany and occupied territories. And he was an amazing combat pilot, and that story needed to be told. And frankly, if you have a chance as a writer, as an author, to write about one of the greatest members of the greatest generation, you do it. You take that opportunity, and that's what I did. And St. Patrick's Day, 1944, his plane is bullet-ridden and on fire over Nazi Germany. And Edward Rodgers said it was the loneliest feeling in the world because he was all alone. The rest of his squadron had peeled off and moved on to the next stage of their mission. And he saved that plane and the lives of 10 crewmen by flying that plane somehow back to the American base in Italy. And even when he was shot down before he was captured, he, according to someone in his plane, Walter Mauser from New York City, who gave a report on this, and 10 of the 11 men in that plane survived by parachuting out. But before they did parachute out, Edward Rodgers navigated that plane, that B-24, away from other American planes because he was afraid if his plane blew up, he might kill someone in a nearby B-24. That is the definition of a hero. And he is buried in Arlington National Cemetery for very, very good reasons. And I just thought this is a story about Rodgers' family that people don't know about. And I thought it was appropriate to open the book that way. And also, at the end of the day, I think it's one of the reasons that Aaron agreed to meet with me, even though this book is unauthorized. I think he saw I was doing it the right way and trying to tell the full story of not only his life, but his family's legacy. And so I think he appreciated that.
And you really can't tell the full story of Aaron Rodgers, to just circle back to the football field now. And just based on what how you've described him growing up and how Craig Rigsbee's dealt with him, and coming from, a bloodline where you have a war hero as a grandfather, you can't tell the story without Brett Favre when he arrives in Green Bay. And it seems like, because the way we describe Aaron Rodgers, he's a gamer. He was always undervalued, under-recruited. No one really gave him a shot except pretty much one person. And it seems very cliche, but it almost is a cliche, where he takes that into Green Bay for his first 3 years as the backup to Favre, and then he eventually becomes the starter after that whole drama. If everybody remembers that 15 years ago. When you dove back into the Favre-Rodgers dynamic, I got to imagine did it seem cliche at first, and then when you started peeling back the layers, were there more unique aspects to that relationship?
I think so. I think I did get a little bit more of an appreciation of what Favre was experiencing. Is he made the Green Bay Packers again. They had down years after the glory years of Lombardi and Starr, and Brett Favre is the one who restored the glory to that franchise. And here he was sitting there in 2005, and all of a sudden the organization drafts his replacement. And it's hard to blame the Packers. Aaron Rodgers was the best player in the draft, and he plunged to 24. So he was by far the best player on the Packers board still available. And so they had to draft him. They had no choice, really. You don't pass up a quarterback like that at pick number 24. So I could understand Favre's perspective. Now, I don't understand why he treated Rodgers the way he did. I don't think that was necessary, particularly the first 2 years. I think by year 3 together, which was Favre's final season in Green Bay, 2007, the relationship got better. I think Favre had more respect for Rodgers. And it's interesting today, their relationship actually is pretty good, because Rodgers felt the pain that Favre felt in 2008 when he was forced out and the Packers turned over the franchise to Aaron. The same thing happened to Aaron. The Packers effectively forced him out, even though Rodgers did want the trade. I still look at that as more of a firing than anything else, because they wanted to hand over the franchise to Jordan Love. So, but yeah, that relationship was fascinating. And I think some people might have forgotten just how difficult it was to replace Brett Favre. It was like, he was so popular. That would be like replacing Mickey Mantle in center field for the Yankees. And even though he was from the South, the people in Green Bay treated him as one of their own. That's how they saw him. He was a hunter. He was a fisherman. He would go out before he got sober into bars and high-five fans, and he thrived on being a man of the people. Aaron Rodgers was seen, Nick, as sort of this odd intellectual from Northern California. The Green Bay Packers fans loved his talent and respected him to the nth degree as a football player, but they never saw him as one of them. And they did see Favre that way. So I think I got, on two fronts, a better appreciation, one, of what Favre felt, even though he didn't handle it the right way, and two, just how impossibly difficult it was for Aaron Rodgers, who was booed when he was drafted by those fans who didn't want him there, to deal with that and deal with replacing a legend. It was a taller task than I realized when I started this process.
Speaking of impossible figures to live up to, Tom Brady, you can't really tell the story of the NFL the last 25 years without Tom Brady, and Aaron Rodgers included. Now, they matched up a handful of times throughout their career. Most recently was that NFC Championship game when Tampa Bay came into Green Bay and, of course, knocked Rodgers out of the playoffs once again. But they never met up in a Super Bowl. And I always appreciated, while reading your book, the callbacks to Tom Brady, and then the quote that really stood out to me, which is, I can't believe this is almost 10 years ago already. Back in 2016, Brady, not verbatim, but said something along the lines of, if Rodgers had the Patriots system and the Patriots support, he'd basically be throwing for 7,000 yards pretty much every single season because Brady always thought Rodgers was way more talented than him. But of course, Brady was the biggest winner in NFL history. When you look at that comparison, the fact that Brady can come out and say that out loud in a public forum, now that's out there. And again, that's 2016. So this is before more championship losses, but it's also after a couple for Rodgers. When Rodgers hears that, do you think that affected him mentally? Did that weigh on him more than he actually let on?
I don't think so. I think that he was happy that Tom said it, frankly, because if anything, it sort of takes a little bit of a burden off Rodgers' shoulders. And it's Brady acknowledging now. Brady said this to an NFL head coach who relayed it to me. And I know exactly where Brady was when he said it, the hour that he said it in on the day. And so I'm not sure he's confirmed this, but he definitely said it. And it was figurative. I don't think he literally meant 7,000 yards.
Of course
the point
not.
was Aaron Rodgers would be a much, much better player in that Patriot way system under arguably the greatest NFL head coach of all time, with the best offensive coordinator of his generation in McDaniels, and obviously Belichick at the top. And just an acknowledgement that if Aaron had that, he'd have more than one ring. He's physically clearly more talented than I am. I think that there's nobody who would deny that. So, hey, sometimes I talked about luck earlier and the residue of design. Well, what if Aaron Rodgers had Belichick and that system and that Patriot way support system that really elevated Brady? He certainly would have more than one ring. I think that's clear. At least I believe that. But listen, he ended up with he had a great career in Green Bay, the 4 MVPs. Yeah, he should have won more rings. Yes, his defense sometimes, a lot of times, let him down. Even special teams in big postseason moments. You look at the 2014 NFC Championship game collapse at Seattle. If they recover an onside kick, Aaron's back in the Super Bowl facing a New England team he defeated in the regular season that year. But there are times that he left points on the field too. And I do feel like that NFC Championship game against Brady in Tampa Bay in Lambeau, that's a game they should have won. And at the end, first and goal at the 8, down 8 points, you feel that Tom Brady in that situation, even though he had 3 interceptions that day, would have willed his team into the end zone, and he would have found a way to score or to come through on that 2-point conversion and force overtime. And Aaron Rodgers didn't gain a single yard, and they had to kick the field goal, although they didn't have to. LaFleur made that decision based on the fact that Rodgers did nothing with those first 3 snaps. And I do feel like that's the difference in their careers, that in those big postseason moments, Brady had a will that was second to none to make things happen. And Rodgers did not have that same intangible impact on his team. And that's a part of his legacy he can't run away from.
It is a fascinating dynamic in comparison. So when you look at the relationships, and I'll circle back into his family in a second, but the coaches, you mentioned Matt LaFleur. Rodgers was not a part of the decision-making. It kind of just was dropped on him, just like the Jordan Love thing as well. So when you look at the relationship between Matt LaFleur, where it was maybe a little bit dicey, it was good, it was dicey, and then all of a sudden it was over before it really got started. And then you look at the relationship that Rodgers had with Mike McCarthy. They did win a Super Bowl together, and I think that needs to be said more often because of all the criticism both guys get now with the Jets and the Cowboys, respectively. But you go back to that Super Bowl, they win, and then you see all these shortcomings, these failures, the championship game losses, particularly the game against Seattle, particularly the game against Tampa Bay. Or sorry, that was Matt LaFleur, but particularly that Seattle game, which really stuck out in my mind. When you have situations like that, and then you combine it with the success of Brady, because that's who he was constantly compared to, was something like that, did that send the relationship between Rodgers and McCarthy over the edge just because it seemed like Rodgers was getting more autonomy in that offense and within the organization at a certain point?
Yeah, I think over time it really, Nick, was the postseason losses and looking at Brady's career, and it was frustrating that Brady's racking up his ring total and Rodgers with Belichick, and Rodgers is not doing that with McCarthy. I think that created stress in the relationship, and it's difficult because the guy, if you're Aaron Rodgers, you're always compared to, is making it look easy as far as winning Super Bowls. And it's not easy. Just winning one, it's so difficult. And a lot of great quarterbacks never won a Super Bowl. So Aaron Rodgers gets criticized for the one ring. Imagine if he had no rings like Dan Marino, he'd never hear the end of it. I think that created stress in that partnership. I think things like play calling and certain plays Aaron wanted in the game plan installed during the week, and McCarthy would install them, but then not call the plays on game day. And that was evident. I have this in the book that's in that collapse at Seattle in 2014. Before that game, Aaron had studied the Cowboys' victory over the Seahawks that year in the regular season, and Tony Romo running about 6 plays to perfection against that great Seattle defense. And Rodgers said, to McCarthy, I want these 6 plays called over and over and over against Seattle. And McCarthy ran 3 of those plays one time each, and that was it. And that was just one small example, although in a big moment, of how they butted heads over approach, game plan, play calling, Rodgers changing plays at the line, and how much that was going on. And it got ugly at the end. And I think today they both realized they had it better than they realized at the time when they were together in Green Bay.
Right.
He didn't win a Super Bowl with Matt LaFleur. He did win one with McCarthy. You can't take that away from either man. And as Aaron said to me on the record, he said, yeah, we butted heads a lot of times, but we also lit it up a lot of years offensively, and you can't take that away from us. And it's true. He's right. And so I do think that today McCarthy and Rodgers look at their partnership and say, you know what? We should have appreciated that more when we were actually together in Green Bay.
Connor with me here on On3 Sports. Out of the Darkness, the Mystery of Aaron Rodgers, out now. A couple more for Ian. Again, I appreciate your time. It's just to circle back to the family dynamic with Rodgers and the estrangement, which is the most fascinating mystery that still has yet to be solved. And you did your best in terms of trying to really unlock it in the book, and who knows if it'll ever be solved. Maybe it will be. I know this is kind of a loaded question, but based on everything that you collected for this book, all the people that you've talked to, everyone has their different perspective. Rodgers obviously did not reveal everything behind the estrangement. He always says, people say one thing, but it's actually this. But I'm not going to tell you what it is. His parents say one thing, but then they're also still supportive, like showing up to the Jets game last year during the opener, fittingly a year ago today. When you look at all of that collected together, were you able to determine where the blame lies, or is it just is that still the mystery that needs to be solved?
I think the blame it really needs to be spread around, and these family fractures are always complicated. This one is an extreme case. It's gone on for 10 years, and it's one person, and Aaron, really driving it, where he's estranged from everyone in his family, not just his parents and his 2 siblings, but also some maternal aunts that were significant in his upbringing, and his maternal grandmother, and other friends that he's exiled from his life. And he's not the first person I've met with that character trait, where if you slight him in a real or imagined way, he's going to remove you from his life. And I have a quote in the book from his good friend Jordan Russell, who was also exiled from his life for a few years and was one of the few people that Aaron brought back, who said, if you're not mission aligned with Aaron Rodgers, he's going to remove you from his path. His goal is to be an all-time great. And if you're a distraction, a hurdle, or he perceives you to be that way, you will be removed, whether you're a family member or a friend. And that's just the way he's wired. There are 15 different issues or so involved in the estrangement. And I won't go over all of them now. I mean, initially at the start, religion was a part of it. It's not so much anymore. He was raised in a devoutly Christian home, and that's something he rebelled against. And I think that planted the seed for other rebellions. He's had issues with his brothers. They've had issues with him. And at the end of the day, he did think that the family unit revolved too much around his fame, fortune, and success. And Olivia Munn, who was blamed by the parents to a large degree for starting the estrangement in 2014, the actress that he was dating, she confirmed his feelings. That was her role in it. But he hasn't dated her in 7 years. So it's not her fault anymore. And I have that hopeful scene in the book hugging his dad. Aaron did last summer at Lake Tahoe before Jets camp. And they each said, I love you. It's the first time they had seen each other or spoken in 9 years. And I'm hoping that that's the first step towards reconciliation. Aaron says in the book that he wants to reestablish a relationship with his father, who was his hero, his idol growing up. He said he wanted to be his dad. So I think if that happens, now his parents are planning on going to the home opener again. I drove them last year to the game on 9/11 against Buffalo. Of course, that only lasted 4 plays. And they are planning on going to the game against the Patriots, the home opener on September 19th. And I don't think there's a planned meeting with Aaron after the game or anything, but I think there's more, I guess, renewed hope that it will happen sooner than later. And as a human being, not a journalist, and just as a father, of course, I'd love to see that happen shortly.
Yeah, without a doubt. So, I'll leave you here with this, and I wanted to circle it back to Brett Favre because, I mean, from a football perspective, it is fascinating the fact that both these guys are Green Bay Packer icons, all-time quarterbacks. They both end up on the Jets. They forced their way out of there. Or they wanted to get out of there. There's drama. They're on the Jets. So all I'm going to say is next, maybe Aaron Rodgers goes to the Minnesota Vikings in a year or two. But when you look at the parallels between their two careers, both winning Super Bowls early on when they were starters, and then just having all these postseason shortcomings, Favre had his own issues off the field, and seemingly still does to this point. Rodgers has his issues off the field, mostly his own doing over the last couple of years, and of course the 10-year estrangement with his family. When you look at the parallels between these two guys and their overall legacies, it seems like Rodgers might have a chance to rectify it on the football field as compared to Favre, where one and done with the Jets and then nearly did it, I guess, with the Minnesota Vikings the following year in 2009. But when you look at those comparisons, because you can't tell the story of one without the other. How do you look at the parallels between these two quarterbacks and ultimately what Rodgers can do for his legacy in these last year, 2 or 3 years of his career?
Well, first off, Nick, I think Rodgers will go down as the better quarterback. I think historically, when you rank the greats with Brady and Mahomes at the top of the list, and Rodgers is somewhere, I have him around 5. Some people have him a little lower than that.
Right.
But I think he's ahead of Brett Favre. I just think he was a better player. And you look at the career passer rating is the greatest of all time. It's a tick ahead of Mahomes. His touchdown interception ratio is by far the best ever. And so I would put him ahead of Favre. I think Favre wanted absolutely no part of New York City, and he was forced to play in New York for a year, was doing pretty good there at 8-3, and then he got hurt. People forget that we in this market, we're talking about a Giants-Jets Super Bowl that year before Favre got hurt. So because the Giants at the time, I think, were 10-1. But yeah, he wanted to get out of New York as quickly as he could, and he executed an escape from New York and ended up where he wanted to go to begin with, Minnesota. Aaron Rodgers wanted to be here. He absolutely wanted this challenge. He wanted to take a big bite out of the Big Apple at the end of his career. He was going from the smallest market to the biggest market, and he saw a great opportunity with the Jets, who haven't been to the Super Bowl in 55 years. And he thought, if I end a championship drought in New York City at the end of my career, it's going to feel like 3 rings or 4 rings. Like Brady's at 7, I'm at 1. I can't close that gap. But figuratively, winning one for the Jets at the end would do so much for his historical standing in the sport. It would be like Mark Messier, what he did in 1994 with the Rangers, times 10. So is that realistic that it's going to happen? I think we'll find out in the coming weeks this year if the Jets can right the ship after a very tough opening night in San Francisco. And I still see them as an 11-6 team this year that can win the division and make a run in the postseason. And we'll see how it plays out.
Out of the darkness, the mystery of Aaron Rodgers, Ian O'Connor. Ian, I really appreciate it, man. Of course, everyone can get your book on Amazon or wherever else they get their books. I really enjoyed it. Highly recommend the rest of your bibliography as well. And again, really appreciate your time today. And maybe in the next couple of years, we'll finally finish this mystery and have all the answers about Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, and a championship at the end of his career, maybe with his family on the field to celebrate like they did for his first Super Bowl victory, would be the perfect happy ending. But thanks a lot for having me, Nick, and hopefully we'll talk again.
Absolutely. Ian O'Connor with me right here on 3 Sports.